Hello, today is the 15th day of Sivan, the 21st of June. We're up to the 6th reading of Parashat Behaalotecha. And the 6th reading begins with finally moving in the famous two verses, which according to the sages constitute a chumash, meaning a section of the Torah that's to itself. Usually we divide the Torah into 5 chumashim. Chumash means a fifth in Hebrew. So there's 5 books of Moses. These are called 5 chumashim in Hebrew. Bereshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim. Or in English they call them Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. But the sages tell us that the first 2 verses of our reading, Vayihi binso Aaron vayomer Moshe, we're looking at Numbers 10, 35 and 36. They're in the Torah scroll, they're written in such a way that they are set apart. They have 2 upside down, rather left side right, nuns that are like parentheses around them, and set them off from the rest of the text. And so the sages say that this relates to a verse, Chatzva Amudei Shiva. She chiseled 7 columns from Proverbs, which is talking about the Torah, and says that there's actually a division of the Torah into 7 parts. So we have the 4 Chumashim, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. But then Numbers is divided into 3. Everything until this verse, everything until Numbers 10:35. Then these 2 verses, which have 85 letters altogether, and they're considered to be a separate section of the Torah, like a 6th book. And then the 7th book would be from 11:1, from Numbers 11:1 and on. So this is a thing that's not so well known, but it's not our focus, but it's related to our focus, because what are these 2 verses? These 2 verses describe what Moses would say when they began to move, when the cloud signaled to them that it's time to disencamp and to start moving. And so in translation there's something like, whenever those carrying the ark set out, Moses would say, "Arise, O God, may your enemies be scattered, and may those who hate you flee from you." And when the ark came to rest, Moses would say, "Repose, O God, among the myriads and thousands of Israel." So those 2 verses, they stand alone in and of themselves. There's a lot to say about them. We won't go into them now, but we couldn't not mention them, given that they're at the beginning of our reading. But then, so they set out on their first journey, and right away, when they had camped in a new place, remember, until now they had been for a year before Mount Sinai, and now they finally set out on their first journey, and they come somewhere to a place that doesn't yet have a name, and we read the following unbelievable description. We're in Numbers 11:1. People sought a pretext to speak evil in God's ears, and God heard this and became angry. A fire from God broke out among them, consuming the extreme of the camp. The remaining people from the mixed multitude cried out to Moses. Moses prayed to God, and the fire subsided. Therefore, the name of that place became Taveira, which means a blaze, for a fire from God had broken out among them. So right away, the first journey ends with a new camp. The first time, 3 days journey, and the first thing you see is everything is falling apart. What's going on here? This is one of the reasons why we explained that the sages set these 2 verses apart, the verses we talked about in the beginning, at the end of chapter 10, because in a sense everything changes. It's not that there were not difficult episodes, maybe the most difficult, the golden calf, before this, but all the time that they were at Mount Sinai, it seemed like things were going well. After the Torah was finally given and God forgave them and they built the tabernacle, and the tabernacle was in order to give forgiveness to the people, and it seemed like everything was going fine. And then they have the first journey, and at the end of the first journey, you get this rebellion against God. But it doesn't end there, because the next few verses describe another rebellion like this. This is called a place, the next journey is in a place called Behaalotecha, the burial place of craving. What happened there? Again, we have strong cravings for food, and we don't have food. And it's all these things, and all we have is the manna, and the manna is disgusting because you just eat it and nothing comes out. And they have all these different, again, like criticisms that we can't even understand. How can a people who saw everything that God had done for them come to this stage? To come to such a state of looking for a pretext to argue with God. One of the explanations for this is that people in general do not look for a pretext to fight with God. It's not how people are built. People would very much want to, in their nature, follow God, especially the Jewish people, especially after everything they had seen. They have a true inclination to follow the goodness of God. So what's going on? As much as they want to follow God, they also have a mundane nature. They have a physical nature. And physical nature is not something to be laughed at. It's very serious. People want to feel, like their criticism of the manna, they want to feel normal. They want to feel that they have a normal body. They don't want to live. It seems to us that we would like to, but people don't really want to live in a state of miracles. They would rather live in a state of nature. And you can't belittle this. It's a very serious thing about the human condition, that if I'm already in this world, I want to feel like a human being. I don't want to feel like an angel. And to a certain degree, Moses was giving them a path that was almost angel-like. It was almost angelic. There was something not normal about it. Now, this is the same thing as, again, the thing they didn't understand was that it was a process. In order to rise higher, you have to have periods in which you do devoid yourself or disconnect yourself to some degree from your mundane habits. In order to grow spiritually, you have to pursue the spiritual. So there are periods of time in which you have to live a little like an angel. Not completely, because you're a human being, but you still have to have a piece of that. And really, the 3-day journey was supposed to be enough to get to the land of Israel, and then they would have gone into the land of Israel and continued to live like human beings who need to till the earth and plow it and sow it and in the end reap it, the harvest, and act like a human being. But there had to be a small 3-day period, which apparently they couldn't handle, or they didn't understand it completely, which was about reaching a state that would then allow you to incorporate it into your mundane practice. And there was only supposed to be a very short time of eating the manna. It wasn't supposed to be for 40 years. It was supposed to be for a couple of weeks. Because there's a certain preparation that you need. So every person, today we certainly don't follow this, even up for 3 days. We want to act like human beings, slowly incrementing our spiritual practice and slowly changing. That's the ideal. That's how Maimonides describes it. Even when you're dealing with changing mundane habits, the changes need to be incremental, they have to be slow, they have to be, as Maimonides says, not even perceptible from day to day. The change should be so incrementally small. But still, there are periods of time when God demands something greater, and they couldn't handle this. So they didn't understand this, and Moses apparently wasn't able to completely explain this to them. So they came up with this thing that we don't want this type of life. we're looking for a pretext to argue with God, because the God that you're describing to us, Moses, we can't live this way our whole lives. Okay, nobody said you have to live this way your whole life. Nobody said you have to be angelic your whole life. But there are periods in which this is needed, and you have to go through those periods also. Those are the periods of journeys in life, where sometimes, famous story from the Maggid of Mezrich, the successor to the Baal Shem Tov, who, when he was visited by a student of by a merchant, who the Baal Shem Tov sent to him to meet him. He went into the Maggid's house and he couldn't believe the poverty. And he said, how is it possible that such a man of God lives in such poverty and such need? And the Maggid told him, when you are on a journey, a business trip, do you take your entire house with you, all your amenities? Or are you willing for a few days to make do with less? So I have to tell you that I too am on a journey. In my case, because he's at a very high spiritual level, my entire life is a journey. So I don't mind not having the amenities. I don't mind not having them my entire life. But in the end, it's because I'm on a journey. And when I'm on the journey, what is important to me is the spiritual benefit that I get. And so there are spiritual journeys in life when we need to do more, when we need to be more angelic, when we need to dissociate to some extent from the mundane. In fact, one would say that every day we have journeys like this, small, limited journeys, an hour long of prayer, 2 hours worth of studying, of learning Torah. At those times we don't sit around and eat and worry about our bodies. We try to act spiritual. We try to imbue ourselves with a higher reality. But it ends. And when the journey ends, you come back to being a human being, hopefully a better one, because you've now been able to incorporate and integrate the spirituality into the mundane. And so, as we'll see next week, they were at the cusp of entering the land of Israel. And to enter the land of Israel, they needed to be able to show that they had integrated what Moses had taught them and could become the holy nation that was worthy of living in the land of Israel. And that we'll see next week how that turned out. I'm sure everybody already knows, but we'll try to analyze it more deeply. At the end of today's reading, we hear of two prophets, Eldad and Medad, who, after not being selected for the 70 elders, had prophecy. And their prophecy was very disturbing to Joshua. Moses was less disturbed. Their prophecy was, Moses will not bring us into the land of Israel, it will be Joshua. Moses said, I wish that the entire people would be full of prophecy, able to connect to God at that level. So don't be harsh on them, Joshua. If that's what God wants, Moses was willing to go along with that. He's a dedicated servant of God. If that's what it takes, it's fine. The secret of it, of course, is that Joshua was more suited, apparently, to take Moses' teachings and explain to people how to bring them into the mundane. And that's what was needed in order to enter the land of Israel and to live a human life, but with a connection to the divine. So with this, I wish everyone a good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. Everybody should be well, and we should hear good news. All the best.